This presentation is on researching and evaluating online information, putting the pieces together. When thinking about researching information online, you need to consider and keep in mind the three keys. One, access. You're going to be searching for information. How are you accessing that? Two, assess. This is evaluating that information that you do find. And three, using the information ethically. Something that's not also often considered, but very, very important as well. So first, let's clarify. There is a difference between searching for information and researching. To me, searching for information means to find it. It's there. It's easy to find information. The research part is actually interpreting it and analyzing it. Unfortunately, we've kind of come too far in our research process if we haven't done any interpretation or analysis. That is key to what research is all about. Finding information is easy. Researching it is much more difficult. So where does that information hide? Well, everyone uses search engines, and you probably have your favorite, which we'll look at in just a next slide, actually. I have made the search engine title on this slide linkable, and it will actually take you to a search story that Google has put out. I really appreciate what they've tried to do in terms of bringing information to us, and this is just kind of a cute way, a digital storytelling method of accessing information. It's not the research part, but it is using Google to access information in more ways than just text. There are also subject directories. Those are a little different than search engines, although there's less of a division line as there used to be. But the link on the slide will take you to a good explanation and some examples of subject directories that Kathy Schrock has out on her website. In addition, you can research information through online databases. Those databases are generally ones that have that you have to pay for, and so they're hidden behind passwords. And I have linked you to our schools, or actually our county's list of libraries, and you can click on one of the, I would say high school more so than the middle or elementary, since they do more research in those areas. But you'll see oftentimes a list of online databases in those particular schools, and you won't be able to access them unless you have the username and password. But those are excellent resources because they've already been vetted, and we already know that they are reliable, dependable information. Whereas what you find in a search engine or a subject directory may be subject to not quite so good of information, and therefore you might want to consider whether it's something usable for your research. But even in the online databases, you have to do some thinking and analysis to determine if this is what is going to be helpful for your particular research question. So a quick poll. I said that we would be looking at various search engines, and I think most of us would certainly agree that that has magnified into probably just one or two. But I've put up 4 on this little poll, and you're looking, for information online. And what website do you usually use to find that information? And the majority of people, whenever I've done this question, have pointed to Google as their primary search engine. Bing is also one that is out there, as is Yahoo. And of course, Wikipedia is another search engine, but it's actually not a search engine as much as it is an online encyclopedia. Provides you with information that has been pulled together by volunteers, and some people have issues with that because it has not been vetted by an expert. But I do believe there's some, especially as a springboard, it's a great informational site. And then there are other websites that could also serve as a search engine for you when you're looking for research. Obviously, they play a major role in research. And sometimes what you're looking for is not where you expect it. When you click on the link here, you'll be taken to a website that was created, in this case by me, but can be created by teachers. And we're using a tool called Share Tabs. But again, there are many, many different other types of, they're basically multi-URLs, pulling a number of websites together into one page so that you and students can focus your research into a particular area. I think it's particularly important when we look for wanting to have a sense of where students will be applying their information and gathering their information, that sometimes they need to have more guidance, and giving them particular websites from which to search is helpful. And if you can do it in a one website URL that gathers those for them, that can be really, really helpful. So that's another way of researching information and helping students to do that. So we've talked a little bit about how you access information, and I don't think that's very difficult anymore. As long as you have the internet, you have a library in a box. You can find information all over the place. And when I ask the question many times, how hard is it for you to find information? Most people say it's not hard at all to find the information. The problem is the evaluation of that information. How do you assess it? How do you know that it's of any value to you? So let's kind of shift gears here and look at this. What do you consider when you evaluate a website? Do you consider the author's qualifications? How do you even know where the author is? Do you consider whether it's objective, whether it doesn't have any bias? Do you consider the date of publication? Or can you, and again, find a date? How about the other links to or other links from that particular website? Or the publisher? Do you consider that .com versus .edu, for example? Any of those click for you, because those do lead into the criteria that we'll be looking at in a second here with regards to evaluation of a website. Okay, so there are a number of criteria that we're going to examine as ways to evaluate a website. The first one is authority. Is there an author for this website? Is the author qualified? Is the author an expert? Who is the sponsor for this particular website? Will that give you a clue as to who the author is and whether the page is reputable or not? Is there a link for information about the author or the sponsor? And when you're thinking about this, it kind of comes back to that rationale of, anyone can publish anything on the web. So we have to use our brains, and we have to teach others to use their thinking skills to critically look at a web page and consider who wrote that web page. And if we don't know who wrote that web page, does that mean it is worthwhile for us? Does it fit our needs? Because it is important, I believe, to consider that authority when looking at evaluating a website. So number one is authority. That's one of the first evaluative criteria that I think is important in looking at websites. The second criteria that we want to consider is accuracy. Is the information reliable? Is it error-free? Is there an editor or someone else who might verify or check the information? Unlike traditional print resources, web resources rarely do have fact checkers, or editors. So when you look at a website, and this is kind of difficult to do, how do you know that it is reliable, error-free, that it is accurate? The third criteria to consider is objectivity. Does the information show a minimum of bias? Or is the page designed to sway your opinion? Is there any advertising on the page, for example? Sometimes that is a way to try and prejudice you. There are other examples of websites that are definitely swayed one opinion or another, and they often hide underneath that. They try to be objective, but they really aren't. And if you look at the author and you consider the information, if you think about it, if you evaluate it, if you assess it for objectivity, you go, I don't know. I don't think this one's quite right up there. So consider objectivity, because sometimes people don't show both sides. They're definitely out there publishing with their one-sided opinion, and that's okay. People are going to do that. But is that have you thought about the pro or the con, the opposite of what they are espousing? And I think that's important as well. So we've looked at accuracy, we've looked at authorship, and now we've looked at objectivity. So there are two more. This next one now is currency. Is the page dated? If so, when was the last update? And how current are the links? You know how frustrating that is to have a link that has either been broken, moved, expired, and what does that say to you about the upkeep of that website, and therefore how current it might be? You know, publications, revision dates, they're not always provided, but if a date is provided, it can mean something in terms of when it was first written or first placed on the web, or even last revised. So the currency of a website is another consideration for you as you're evaluating that website to see if it is valuable for you. And the last one we'll mention is coverage. What topics are covered on the page? And what does that particular web page offer that maybe another one would not offer? Is it valuable intrinsically for you? How in-depth is the material? Frequently, it is difficult to determine the extent of coverage of a topic from a web page because the page may or may not include links to other places. So that when it does have other links to other places, it shows the involvement and the depth that the author has put into the coverage of that content. Sometimes, the information that's out there on the web is just for fun, or it's a hoax, or it's someone else's opinion. And that may be of interest to you, but we really need you to consider whether that web page has the content, the coverage that you need as you're doing your research. So how good is the information? When you're evaluating a website, you consider those five: the authorship, the accuracy, the objectivity, the currency, and the coverage. On this particular slide, you'll have a link to Tree Octopus, which is a website that in fact is a hoax, but it can fool a lot of children especially, and they get all excited when they see this website because they think there's something really true out there called a tree octopus. But there are plenty of ways in using that those five criterion, the OCCs, that will help to determine that, this one doesn't work very well. This is not a very good site using that criterion. Something to consider too when looking at Wikipedia is, we can get into a discussion, but the whole idea that many people frown upon Wikipedia is because it's not written by experts, so they think. And we have done some research, and we know that, in fact, Wikipedia does come from volunteers, that anyone out there can post on Wikipedia, but many people don't realize that there are a cadre of experts that help to keep that site accurate. It's just that they don't have the same process of using it as like a Britannica online or even a print encyclopedia. So, but with any resource, you really need to find a second one to back it up. So just like any other, Wikipedia can be a great starting point, great springboard for other resources to begin your research. So we've looked at the first aspect of researching and evaluating online, and that would be accessing the information. We've also considered now how to evaluate and assess that information. Now let's talk a little bit about using information ethically. First of all, you do need to realize that in our culture, in America, we have the independent focus and one of ownership, one that has come from a long history of work, and so we also are more independent than other cultures. So if we create something, we think it's ours. In other cultures, when something is created, it's viewed more as a community venture instead of a individual venture. So our culture does definitely focus that, and it does that to some degree with our copyright laws, which are antiquated and probably, and well, definitely need some looking at, but it is what we have to work with right now. There are certain facts and that are common knowledge. You don't need to verify those. You know that the color of that wall is white, or whatever it happens to be. But when looking at doing some additional research, copyright is the law that we need to be respectful of and see how it fits in with our educational institutions. Fair use is a addendum to that, in essence. It allows certain organizations, including education, to use materials that are copyrighted without having to get permission. And the copyright law, in simplicity, of course it's much more complex than this, but copyright says that you must give credit for, most students know this, you must give credit for the information that you have taken and used in your paper, or if you've used a picture in a multimedia presentation, etc. You must give credit to people. But they don't remember that really the copyright law says you can't even do that without asking permission. And how many times have you asked for permission to use something that you've taken off of the web that was copyrighted to put in your Facebook page, or to create a PowerPoint slide presentation, or whatever? In essence, you've probably broken copyright. And of course, you know, the argument is who's going to catch you, but and in the digital world, it becomes a little bit tougher to deal with. So fair use allows educational institutions within the classroom sense, again, this is a kind of an older version, but within the classroom sense, to use material without having to ask for permission, but you must still give credit to the original author or photographer, or whatever that person, that creator has created. So now we're looking at then copyright modified for educational institutions. Most people are pretty comfortable with that, except that now that we've moved into the digital or internet world, we've got another issue, because now we are in a position where you're going outside the classroom, you're posting things on the web, and fair use no longer really applies to that. So we're going to hopefully introduce to you Creative Commons, which is a way that you can access information, mostly digital oriented information that you can use without having to ask for permission. You still need to give citation to, or attribution to the creator. But now you do not have to ask for permission because permission has already been granted. Anyone that puts on what they've created a CC symbol has given permission with other kinds of rights protected for others to use their materials. So the link on this slide leads you to the Creative Commons website. Lots more to learn with that, but we're going to just get you started with thinking about that. From the academic perspective, of course, plagiarism is another aspect of using information ethically. I'm just going to run through these slides long enough for you to have a chance to read them. But there are many types of plagiarism, and some of them are when the citation is not, or the attribution is not given at all, whereas others are more along the lines of you've done a citation, but it's not done correctly. So in our classes, we'll be using APA style, and you need to be familiar with that. At the end, you'll get some links for that. So the first one is the ghostwriter. Then we have the person who does the photocopy. Then there's the potluck paper. The self-stealer, which probably won't happen too much for y'all until you get to writing an awful lot. Then we start looking at types of plagiarism where the citation has been made, but it has been done inaccurately, and or whether by neglect or purposeful, it still is an issue of plagiarism, the forgotten footnote. The misinformer. The too perfect paraphrase. The resourceful citer. And of course, when we come down to how to avoid it, avoiding plagiarism can be done by planning and organizing. I know, procrastinators, that's not a fun thing to hear, but that does help. Evaluating your sources. Knowing and practicing the differences between quotes, paraphrasing, and using your own ideas. Citing accurately. And the best advice is that if you are not sure, go ahead and cite your source. There are a number of different citation styles. As I mentioned, we'll be using APA style, so that's a little bit blued out, but if you click on the link APA in that first bullet, you'll be taken to a website that provides you more information about that citation style. And then there are two other links under helpful tools that again kind of blued out, so you can't see them very well, but one is Bibme, which is a great, along with the second one, which is Citation Machine. They are great ways to make your life a lot easier with creating bibliographies of your references. And then my last page is my reference page, and so you have access to being able to look into that information a little bit more in depth if you'd like to explore where I gathered my information. So hopefully that gives you a good start on researching and evaluating online information.